Hello, my brethren and cisterns. Good to have you back for episode number 2 of our witness walkthroughs. Today we have a special guest joining us today. This guy was screaming in his crib, and I would not have been able to record any of this, so I figured I'd let him sit in my lap and join us. In this episode, we're going to be continuing with our discussion, not conversation, our discussion with Dennis. And in this part of that gospel encounter, this is where we swing from kind of the part of that discussion or that talk that where we began with kind of an introduction, getting to know one another. And now we're going to swing that to a very pointed part of this encounter where we really start talking about the afterlife. What is it going to look like when we stand before God someday? How does that part of the conversation typically go? And it's also going to start branching out like every conversation will, because everybody is unique, and these things, you never know what someone's going to say. Although if you have enough of these conversations, you start hearing the same things over and over. But in this part of the conversation, we're going to hear discussions on evolution. We're going to hear discussions on what is God's love, how does that play into discussions about the afterlife, and how does judgment or sin or the gospel, how does all this kind of work together? So we're going to discuss that. I did want to say thank you to my good buddy Brett Morani, who he's got his own podcast, The Sound of Truth, and I'm a regular co-host on that show. But he gave me this hat. You can see here, pretty cool, nice, cool looking. It says theologian on there. I will say this, where it says theologian, that actually kind of intimidates me, because then it makes me feel like I've got to know the things that a theologian knows. I am by no means a theologian, but I do think the hat is cool, so I'm going to wear it. All right, so with that, let's get into this conversation. Let's plug in and let's see what we can learn from this encounter with Dennis. Guys, one of the most important things that we can remember when we're having these conversations with people is it is so important, vitally so, to remember the person's name. So I use this trick. Whenever somebody says their name, I immediately take the first letter of their name and really associate it with them so that I never forget their name. So it's a little tip that I give to you guys. Just remember the first letter and you'll never forget their first name. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, you said your name was Devin? Dennis, sorry. I knew the D was there. I was probably want to start remembering the first letter and all of the subsequent letters after that. That'll probably be the best trick in terms of memorizing someone's name. So close with the D.
You're close, dude.
Very close.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dennis, so let me ask you this. So if you were, let's take the Christian perspective, right? So it sounds like you're somewhat familiar with it. You may not know all the ins and outs of what the Bible says or anything, but
no,
we'll play around with it.
Not really.
If you were to pass away, right, and you were to stand before God, and he says, Dennis, or where do you think you would go? Do you think you'd go to heaven? Do you think you'd go to hell? Again, this is one of those opportunities to demonstrate how important it is to kind of know where you want to take the conversation. Again, like I mentioned in the last episode, I'm very rusty. I have not shared the gospel with somebody in a long time, and you can tell because as I'm thinking of questions to ask, trying to find the right question that will take the conversation to the next place closer to letting me explain the gospel. You can see I'm kind of stumbling over myself here, so hopefully you guys get the opportunity to learn from my mistakes. And you guys will know, the best questions to ask to help lead this conversation closer to Jesus Christ.
Neither.
You'd go to neither. So, okay, if God goes, all right, Dennis, there's going to be two places you can go after you die, heaven or hell. Which way do you think you're going?
I don't believe in heaven or hell.
Understandably that you don't believe in it. But let's hypothetically
say.
Yeah. When you ask a question like that, it's understandable that there might be some hesitation from somebody who's kind of uncomfortable or not used to having conversations like this. That's why I always like to just throw in that word hypothetically, if this were to happen. And that kind of cuts through a lot of the confusion or cuts through a lot of the hesitance and allows the person to answer the question in a comfortable manner. Yeah.
Heaven.
Heaven? Okay.
Yeah.
And so then God goes, okay, Dennis, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say?
Because he loves me.
Because he loves you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a great answer.
Man, Dennis's answer is spot on. What a great answer here, but man, does he throw me for a loop. As you guys are out there talking to people, asking them that very question, by far, most people will begin to proclaim their own goodness before God as their justification for getting into heaven. And it is the minority, the fraction of people who will call out on God's love for their entrance into heaven. And if you didn't notice there, he definitely threw me for a loop with this question just because it is one of those that is just so rare for me to hear.
If he were to say, I do love you, but in order to come into this place, we need to check off a few things to see if you've broken any rules.
Mm-hmm.
And are you familiar with the Ten Commandments?
Galatians chapter 3 verse 24 says, "Therefore the law was our tutor to bring us to Christ." And that's what I'm going to use in this conversation to bring Dennis before God, is I'm going to use the law of God or the Ten Commandments and kind of see how he does when he judges himself by God's law.
Yeah, but I can't remember the actual ones.
I'm not going to quiz you on having to memorize it. That's fine.
Yeah.
One of them says, and we'll just see if these kind of bring to memory what some of them are. So the 9th one says, "Thou shalt not lie." So if he said, "Dennis, have you ever told a lie?"
Yes.
Okay, you'd be like, "Okay, yes, I've told a lie." All right, well, you've broken that rule. All right.
Yeah.
The 8th commandment says, "Thou shalt not steal." Right? Have you ever stolen anything? The value doesn't matter. Anything.
Anything.
Have you ever stolen anything?
Like a pencil.
Anything that wasn't yours?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever stolen anything more than a pencil?
25 cents.
Okay. Well, man,
You're up there.
Yeah, he is. He's getting up
Pencils
there.
are like 10 cents.
Right. I remember somebody. I had to think about that. Right.
Yeah.
When I was in college here, actually, and I knew on my laptop I had 900 songs that I had downloaded I'd never paid for at all. So if those songs were like 25 cents each, I had stolen like hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, I've definitely broken that one.
Remember, during these conversations, we're not trying to put ourselves out there as the perfect role model or that anyone needs to meet our standard. And I use this as an example for me to say, hey, Dennis, I have broken these laws too, and sometimes in doing so, that can help bring down any barrier that the person you're talking to is having. They might think, hey, he's just going to hit me over the head with all these commandments and kind of feels judgmental, but instead here I am saying, hey, I've done the same thing, and here's an example of how I've broken this law. So you might want to try that when you're out there talking to people.
Okay, but you've stolen something, right? So even if it's a small thing,
Yeah.
if we be technical, it's like, okay, check that box, you've broken that one. This is a tough one, right? So I think it's the 7th commandment. It says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Okay, but in the New Testament, Jesus says, you've heard it said of old, Dennis, maybe, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." But I say to you, if you look with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. So he's even kind of judging your thought patterns or whatever. And if you're having these lustful thoughts, that's committing adultery. Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you had those thoughts that you shouldn't be having, then he say that that's adultery. That's just 3 of the 10 commandments. We'll stop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we just go through 3. And he goes, all right, well, we're just going to go through these first 3. You've broken these 3. So, Dennis, we got a problem here. If you've broken these 3 commandments, would you consider yourself innocent or guilty of breaking God's laws, God's rules?
Based on the Christian view,
Yes.
I would say guilty.
Be guilty. Is there another view that you'd say, okay, even though I did break those commandments, I would still be innocent? Is there another way to view that?
Yeah.
Okay, walk me through that.
What I believe is we as humans put human emotions onto God.
Okay.
And we believe as him as being egotistical.
Like anthropomorphize God.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I believe in. And so we humans, we love power. We love to be admired by other people.
Mm-hmm.
We love admiration. And what I believe is God, we put our human perspective onto God. Like we say, okay, God would love human admiration.
Right.
But in reality, why would God give a two about
Mm-hmm.
what people think of him?
Right.
That's what I believe, and I believe in that he doesn't give a like he doesn't care if people believe him or not. And so that's why I believe in the view of if I die, there's reincarnation, there's no heaven or hell. It's just a chance game. That's what I believe in.
Got you. So, and then a flip view on that would be so there's a perspective of maybe, and I think they call it, like, one person puts a name to what you just said, like a very deistic idea.
View to it too, like where some people might be, well, God, they'll just say God does care, and that.
Well, why would he create everything if he didn't care?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
Like, you don't make a painting and you go, this is trash, I don't care about this anymore. Like, you put work and effort into it, and you're like, of course you're gonna you don't want someone to come in and rip it up or something.
I believe that he led evolution.
Okay.
I don't believe in creationism.
Yeah.
Creationism. I don't believe that. I believe that there was evolution.
Right.
There's an overwhelming preponderance of evidence that it's true. And so I believe, maybe God created evolution to let humans take its course.
Okay.
Or let nature take its course.
Right. And in the biblical view, that evolution doesn't have to say that there was no evolution. There are plenty of Christians who say, yeah, same thing you say. I believe, God had his hand in evolution, right? Now, there are other Christians who say, no, I don't think so. I believe in he just created everything, right? And it wasn't guided by evolution. But that's kind of like a non-starter. You can believe the Bible and be on both sides.
You never know where these conversations can go, and sometimes they might go down a rabbit trail, which in other circumstances, and if you have unlimited amount of time, it's perfectly fine to go into these different ideas and different topics. However, when you have a finite amount of time with somebody, and you definitely want to hit your goal of being able to explain the gospel to somebody in such a way that maybe they've never understood, to really plant that seed or water that seed, there are times when you're going to need to bring it back to the focus or to the goal rather than following that rabbit trail. And that's what I try to do here. I don't want to get into a big, long discussion about evolution, although I would love to. You want to control that desire so that we can make sure that we have an opportunity to share the gospel.
Yeah, just everybody has their perspective, and I believe that evolution took its course, and God let it take its course. But I think one of the strongest arguments that theists have is intelligent design.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the strongest arguments that theists have, is
that there is a God, is
that
this
there
idea
is
of
a God,
intelligent design.
that they created genetics and
the DNA, it's like information in the cell.
RNA and DNA, and I think that's the strongest argument they have.
I would agree it's a very strong argument. It's like, how do you overcome their information in the cell, that's...
So are you going around asking students what their perspectives on religion is?
That's part of what we're doing, for sure. We're actually Christians, and we're just coming out here trying to spark conversation, ask kids, I say kids, ask
we're young.
students.
We're
I know.
I tried to correct him.
I know, he's like, stop calling them kids.
Oh, we're young.
They're adults.
We talk to students about, this kind of their religious beliefs, and hopefully have an opportunity to kind of share what the Christian perspective is with them
wonderful.
as well.
Yeah,
Right.
That's good.
And I thought it was cool because you got the interfaith thing going on. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I think they're giving away free dinner over there on the green.
I didn't know that.
Neither did we. We walked in and it was like, oh, it's interfaith week. So it's all the faiths are kind of talking about what's going on.
Well, that's wonderful. You're going around sparking conversations.
Yeah.
I think it's a right thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm not Christian myself. I'm like I said, I'm agnostic. My friend was really Christian, and he...
On a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
Right.
Like, he knows there's a heaven and hell. Like,
right.
He knows that God will judge him someday.
Yeah.
He knows this for certain.
For sure.
And he was like, what about you? Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being I know for certain.
Yeah.
And 1 being, nah, it's probably not. How much do you believe in heaven and hell?
I'm really interested to hear how you guys would answer Dennis's question here. So go ahead, take a second, go pop it into the comment section below so I can see what you guys would say.
I would have to say I'm probably like a 9 or a 10.
Really?
And I think the 1, like when I say the 9, that's more like sometimes I don't live like it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't live like there's a God who's actually cares about me and wants me to, live a certain way. But everything, it only makes sense that there would be. Like, why are we all here? What is our purpose? I think God really answers all those questions, where if you don't have a creator to step in to answer that question, then you're really kind of floating in the ocean saying, well, if we don't know that there was a creator, then really, what do we know?
Yeah.
It could be there's nothing after we die, or there is something. Maybe it's reincarnation, but if there's no creator that's kind of guiding it, then to me almost seems like it would. Well, there wouldn't even be existence too. I don't understand how we have the universe without something that created it as well.
I have the belief that reincarnation can happen even with no creator.
Yeah.
That's what I believe in. Because, like, my rationale is, if we're born biologically today, what's not to say we're going to be born biologically again? Like...
But why?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, with that same argument, you could go, if we're born biologically today, what's to say we are never born again? Like, there's no why behind it.
Yeah, I know.
But I do get what you're saying. Like, your gut is telling you, like, that sounds right.
Yeah, like, that's a good point. Like,
it's
why?
Like your gut, your intuition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just lean towards creation, or not creationism.
That there's something next,
there's
right?
something next, yeah.
And that we all kind of share. It sounds like we all kind of share this kind of spiritual soul sort of thing. So that's got to live on.
Something that, like I said again, like, if we're born biologically one time, what's preventing us from being born again biologically? Like, biologically, I could be something else in my future, but that kind of assumes that there's like a spirit in it.
It has to be. Yeah, there has to be a spirit or a soul, like some immaterial spiritual thing that is you. That continues on after this shell is gone.
Yeah.
Something inside you tells you that there's something more to this, that there's something more to me than just a piece of meat, right?
Yeah. My mom thinks that we're just a piece of meat. Yeah.
So let me ask you, so to get back to what we were talking about, I know you were saying that you don't necessarily believe in the Christian God or everything, but let's, hypothetically, if he does exist, and if he does have these rules, and as you mentioned, you would be guilty of breaking those rules, right? Would a good judge reward someone who has broken the law, or would he punish someone who's broken the law?
Punish.
Yeah. And if you are in that category of being someone who's broken the law, and we admit that God must be a good judge, then does it concern you that, if today were the day you die and you stand before him, then there might be punishment that's coming your way? Does that concern you, hypothetically speaking, if God exists?
This question represents the milestone that we have been traveling towards in this entire conversation. We've established a few things in order to get here. We've explained what sins are. He's admitted to committing sins, admitted his own guilt, admitted that a just God would punish criminals, and established that he himself would be a criminal. And so this question is the one that we've been driving towards this entire time. If you were to stand before God as a self-admitted criminal, and God were to judge you and therefore punish you for breaking these laws, does it concern you that he would punish you and send you to hell? That's the question that we really want to drive to, because we want this person to be confronted with the idea that someday they'll have to stand before a holy God and they'll be held accountable for everything that they've done. And we want them to have to deal with that question.
No, and why not?
Because if this is our first life, out of billions of years that the universe existed, if this is our first life, we are apt to make mistakes. Because this is our first life. Like, we make mistakes like children. So I don't understand why God would be so punishing to people who it's their first life in the universe.
Right.
Like, someone who's 80 years old to us is old, but to God, 80 years old is a newborn.
Right.
So why would he punish us, our first time, our first life, first experiences, first mistakes? Why? And that's what I would ask, because we're brand new, so I don't think that he would be so judgmental if it's our first time. If we were living for like 10 times or 10 lives and we're still breaking rules, then I can kind of see how he would punish us for breaking such a mistake.
I get confused with Dennis's answer here, because he mentions only having one life so often, and it reminds me of his idea of reincarnation, which made me think that perhaps he was, bleeding back into that idea of reincarnation. I wanted to challenge him. If he believes that we are reincarnated and that we come back so often, Has he learned anything from his past lives? As you'll see, I was misunderstanding where he was going with that. But that happens. You'll have conversations. You'll misunderstand one another. That's perfectly fine. Just admit the confusion and continue moving forward.
You know,
do you think that you've learned lessons from your past lives that you're able to apply to this one?
I believe that this is our first life. Oh, actually, no. Wait, remember I was saying earlier reincarnation? Yeah. So
well,
this could be my second life, could be my third life.
Right, because you keep saying, this is my first life, but
but we don't remember, though.
That's what I'm saying. We're all only going to have one life, is what I'm saying.
I was going off base of your view, though.
Oh, okay. So you,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I was confused because you kept saying the first life, and I was like, what is that? There wouldn't be multiple lives.
The one and only life.
Right. It would be your one and only.
Your view.
Okay, got you. So yeah. So if
your view.
Thank you. Okay. So that I was confused.
Yeah.
So as we end this episode, let's sum up a few things that I wanted to hit on here at the very end. We did get to ask Dennis the big question, and that being, if you were to stand before God as a guilty sinner, does it concern you that him being a just God, he will give us punishment? Now, Dennis today said, no, that wouldn't concern him. And if somebody says that, there might be a few things going on. Number one, they might be lying. You know, maybe they are really trembling in their heart, or they're really concerned about it or bothered by the idea, but they don't want to admit it. Or perhaps they don't really care. And that's just because perhaps they have their priority somewhere else. They're not really concerned about it, thinking about the afterlife, or many different things. No matter what, if somebody tells me that they're not concerned about someday standing before God in judgment, well, I'll spend the remainder of the conversation, or however long I have with them, just continuing to delve into that idea. Why would you not be concerned about your eternal well-being? And so that's what we're going to try and pick up next week when we have episode 3. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this episode. If you guys have any ideas of how I can improve these, if you guys have any ideas on how if you guys have any ideas on how I can improve these episodes, or maybe you have some ideas on how I could ask some better questions, please interact here on the channel. Put those comments down below, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell. Apparently that does things. But at the very least, and the most important, please be praying for me and be praying for the people that God gives me to be able to share His gospel with. Pray for Dennis this week.